Hey guys, Paul Mascetta here with InfluenceMaster.com, and today I wanted to take a moment to talk about the basic steps involved in an effective sales presentation. Now, before you turn this video off and think, hey, I'm not in sales, I'm not a salesperson, I don't really need to learn anything about a sales presentation, you should think again. And the reason why is simple. Selling is taking place all the time in everyone's life. You are always selling a product, a service, or at the very least an opinion to someone else to get them to comply with a request of yours. Even if you're a house mom or a homemaker, at some point you're going to want to get your children to comply with your request. And so having the ability to sell or to get people to comply is very important, and everyone should know it. It's something. It's a technique, and it's something that every single person on the planet should know. What I'm going to share with you today is by no means an in-depth training on how to become an expert salesperson, but it will give you a basic understanding of the steps that are involved, okay? Step one is something we call the meet and greet. This is where you meet and greet your prospect. You introduce yourself to them, you ask them how they heard about your product or service or whatever it is that you're offering, and it's kind of a way to pre-qualify them. So in other words, if you're selling a product or service that is really only used by people who live in the area, if you ask someone, hey, how did you hear about us? Do you live or work in the area? And they tell you, no, I'm just traveling, I'm a tourist, I'm only here for a couple of days, then you know that they're probably not a qualified lead. But little things like this are what takes place in the meet and greet aspect of everything, where you introduce yourself, you ask them how they heard about your product or service, and then you give them a basic idea or understanding of what's going to take place next, that you're going to ask them some questions, you're going to show them around, and you're going to try to find the best solution for them. Okay, step two is when you sit down with them and you perform something called a needs, or as we're calling it today, a wants analysis. Because the reality is that everybody has needs, but most people act on their wants. They act on what they feel they want, their desires. And so a wants analysis is basically when you ask a series of questions to determine what this person's needs or what this person's wants are. And you do this for a couple of reasons. Number one, it enables you to understand what their perceived vision of value is, okay? You always have to remember that the presentation is never about you. It's never about what you think is valuable. It's about what they think is valuable. If you try to make the presentation based on what you think is valuable, you could run into a problem if they don't see things the same way. And remember, people do not see things the same way. If we all saw things exactly the same, there would be no such thing as persuasion, influence, gaining compliance. We would all be living in harmony with one another, having the same ideas, and acting accordingly, acting in accordance with each other. So no one would ever have to ask for compliance for someone else. The key is to determine what their perception of value is and then create your presentation based on that. You do that by asking them a series of questions. Questions like this. Are you going to be using this stapler for home or for work purposes? Are you going to have to order more than one at a time? How much of it do you think you'll be using on a daily basis? Questions like that do a couple of things. First, they determine what reasons I have for buying it. Okay, once you determine what my reasons are for buying it, you can structure the presentation based around those needs and build my emotional level to the point that by the time the presentation ends, I'm so emotionally high, I'm so ready to buy this thing that the closing part is the easiest part. The second thing that questions do is they give you the ability to build rapport with me. Rapport is a very, very important part of a sales process because it enables people to connect. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're in an argument or maybe a debate, a heated debate with someone that you're very close to, maybe a friend, a family member, or someone that you love, or someone that you have a very close relationship with? And oftentimes, you're able to get your point across and win the debate because you said something that basically crossed the line. It's something that you probably wouldn't have said to someone that you're not so comfortable with. But because you have such a good relationship with this person, you can say something to them that just hits them and it enables them to see things your way. Well, the reason why you're able to do this is because of the rapport that you have built with this person over a long period of time. The quicker that you can build rapport with someone when you first meet them, the better your chances of selling them. So the first key in rapport, or helping to build rapport, is by asking questions. It opens up the door for conversation, an exchange of words between people. This is the first platform which rapport is built on. So that's another reason why you want to ask questions. The third reason why you want to ask questions is because it's going to enable you to discover any possible objections that might come up later in the presentation. And you'll be able to mentally equip yourself with the ability to overcome them once that happens. So, for example, if you were thinking about buying a car from me and I said, well, how long have you been thinking about this? And you said, for the past 6 months. And I said, well, are you driving a car now? And you said, no. And so I said, well, thinking to myself, you don't have a car, you haven't driven one in 6 months. My next question to you is, what has stopped you thus far, from making a purchase? And you might say to me, my finances. I haven't had the money to do it. Now I'm going to ask you, is this still a problem for you? And you're going to say, depending on the monthly payment of the car or what it works out to be, we have to get to that point, and I'll know whether or not I can fit that into my finances. I'm making a mental note that at some point at the end of my presentation, you might bring up an objection that has to do with money, and I have to begin to prepare myself to overcome that. So those are the 3 reasons why you want to ask questions during the sales presentation process. Remember, number 1 is because you want to discover their needs and tailor your presentation based upon that. 2, it enables you to build rapport. And 3, it enables you to discover any possible objections that might come up later down the road. Next step is the actual presentation. Now, presentations vary from product or service. It really all depends on what you're selling. If what you're selling is based on features or benefits, there's different ways to present different things, and that would really depend on the market that you're in. The only universal keys that I could give you are, always make sure that you build your presentation based upon what you learned during the needs analysis. For instance, if you're selling a car and a person's telling you things like, miles per gallon really interest them, or they have children, obviously, you don't want to be talking about the torque on a car, or how it can go from 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds, or how fast the car is, or you don't even want to show them any sports cars, because the fact of the matter is that most people with children aren't interested in cars that go really fast if they're going to be putting their children in them. And if someone tells you that they're interested in saving money on gas, you don't want to present them with something that is going to do the opposite. You don't want to present them with a car that's known for guzzling gas. So little things like that. You just have to keep in mind of what their needs are during the presentation and build and structure your presentation around that. You can also throw certain cues, mental cues during your presentation, which, in other words, you can assume that they are already involved or purchasing your product or service. So you can ask them a question like, so when you buy the car, just remember that you have to get the oil changed every 3,000 miles or every 3 months. This is basically placing a mental trigger into their mind. It's the law of assumption. You are assuming that the purchase is already made. Okay? Another thing that you can do during the sales presentation is to ask yes questions. Constantly ask the person questions that are going to answer in a yes. So, wouldn't it be great to have a car to be able to get to and from work every day? Yes. Wouldn't it be great to be able to take your kids on a great vacation in your car? Yes. Always ask questions that end in yes. What this does is it conditions the person's mind to be in a yes state, so that by the time you get to the price and to the close, it's very hard for them to say no once they've said yes so many times. Okay? Next step is the price presentation. This is where you sit down and you present the price of whatever it is that you're offering. Again, this all varies based upon what you're selling. But the only thing that I can tell you, there are some universal principles that you can apply here. The first one is, keep your choices limited. The more choices that you give a person, the greater the chances of them not making a decision. choices and too many of them confuse people. When people come to see you, a lot of the times they're already confused. They're not sure of what they're going to do or what type of a decision that they're going to make. And so the key is to make it as easy as possible for them. Secondly, if this person has had a history of procrastinating or not acting on making decisions, if you're overwhelming them and giving them more choices, all you're going to do is feed that need to procrastinate and put things off. The simpler your choices, the better, and the fewer the better. Studies have shown that if you give a person more than 2 choices of buying, the probability of them making a decision that day drops by around 50%. Once you give them more than 3 choices, it decreases by around 70%. Every time you give somebody a new choice, you're automatically limiting the possibility of them actually making a purchase that day. So that's the first thing that you want to do. The second thing that you want to do is you need to induce scarcity in some way. You have to create some sort of urgency. You have to give them a reason to act that day. Now, some salespeople or some people who sell or have a point of view on selling sometimes think that that's sleazy or underhanded. But the reality is that people that are selling are in business to sell, and people that are ultimately looking to buy something will make that purchase at some point. The key is to make them make that purchase as soon as possible so both parties win. So you can only do this by creating some sort of scarcity or creating urgency where the person needs to buy the product or service that day. It could mean that the price is going to go up, that the supplies are limited, that there's a time frame on when the price is going to change. But at some point you need to create some sort of urgency and induce scarcity. The fact of the matter is that the subconscious mind of a human being is wired in a way that we desire things more when the possibility of not having them increases. So what does that mean? That means that the less available something is, the more we want it. And that's just the way the subconscious mind is trained. I guess perhaps it has something to do with the fact of loss. People don't want to feel like they're losing something. And so that's where creating urgency and scarcity has a positive effect on on your selling efforts, okay? And then the last thing that you want to do after you've made the price presentation is you want to ask for the sale. Once you ask for the sale, the key is to be quiet. Remember this rule. Once you ask for the sale, whoever speaks first loses. So if you open your mouth and begin talking again, what you're doing is you're giving them a reason to not make a decision. I have personally sat with people sometimes for almost 5 minutes in complete silence. And yes, it gets uncomfortable and it gets a little weird, but at the end of the day, it's going to force them into a place where they have to make a decision. And that decision is either going to be a yes or a no. If it's a yes, great, you signed the paperwork, you made the sale. If it's a no, then what happens is you just move on to the next step of the process, which is overcoming objections. And the way that you overcome those objections, regardless of what they are, is by going back to the needs analysis and finding out why this decision to walk into your place was of importance to them to begin with. Dig back and find out those emotional reasons as to why they came in and show them what they have to lose by not acting today. A lot of people always focus on the gain, okay? They focus on, well, you came in, you walked into the gym, you said you want to lose 20 pounds, do you really want to put this decision off? You're going to look great, you're going to feel great, you'll be able to go to the beach in the summer and feel good about yourself, and that's all fine, and you can use that stuff. But remember this, people are more motivated to act based on what they have to lose than what they have to gain, okay? People make decisions or they act. Usually it drills down to one of two things. It's either the desire to experience pleasure or the desire to avoid pain, okay? Pain and pleasure, those are the two driving forces as to why we do everything in life. And statistically speaking, people act more or they will do more to avoid pain than they will to experience pleasure. People do not like to lose stuff. They don't like to lose time. They don't like to lose relationships. And they sure as hell do not like to lose money. So if you can show this person how the decision to not act today and purchase your product or service is going to impact them from a position of loss in some way, the odds of them getting to act are higher than if you showed them potential gain. So again, those are the basic steps to a sales presentation. Again, let me just recap them with you. First is the meet and greet. Then is the needs analysis. then is the presentation, then is the price presentation, and then there's overcoming objections. Those are the 5 areas that you want to cover and make sure that you follow in sequence when you're giving a sales presentation. If you deviate from that process in any way, if you go right to the price presentation before you've asked any questions, you're probably not going to make a sale. If you make a price presentation based upon what you think is important, you're probably not going to make a sale. If you follow those steps the way I showed you, your likelihood and your chances of making the sale will go up that much more. Until next time, Paul Mascetta here with InfluenceMaster.com, wishing you a great day.